Our God is an amazing God. He is all wise. His thoughts comprehended, his ways beyond reaching. From the beginning, he had a plan, and his plans cannot be thwarted. No one can say, "What are you doing?" Yeah, that's a wake-up call. We'll go back a little bit before we continue on today. You remember Abraham, how God had chosen him from among the nations and given him a promise. He said, "I am going to increase your descendants, and I'm going to bless you. And whoever blesses you, I will bless, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And I will make through your descendants, or through your offspring, not plural, but singular, offspring, I am going to bless all the nations on the earth." He said, look up at the stars, if you can count them. In the same way that you can't count the stars, you will not be able to count your descendants. Well, you remember what the problem was. Abraham had no descendants at that time. He had no children. And he had to wait. How long? Can you remember how long he had to wait before that happened? 25 years. And when the starting date is 75, 25 years is a very long time. She was 65, his wife. But in the end, it did happen. 25 years later, when he is 100 years old and she is 90, it happened. Sarah gave birth to a son. There I am. Okay. And gave birth to a son, and they named him Isaac, because back when God made them the promise for I don't know how many time, when he was 99 and she was 89, they laughed when God made them that promise again, that you're going to have a son through your wife, Sarah. So they named him He Laughs, or Laughter. And Isaac, he grew up. And one day God tested him. You remember what happened? God tested him. He said, "Abraham, take your son, your only son, the one that you love, and sacrifice him on a certain place that I will show you on a mountain as a burnt offering to me." And Abraham had learned to trust God. It is a learning process for all of us to come to trust God. It takes time. It takes a lot of experience for us to come to a place of faith like his. And I'm not sure, I am certainly not come to that place where he was at this point. So anyway, so he did. He did exactly as God had said. He went to Mount Moriah. And that mountain is actually the center of a city that is now named Jerusalem. And it became the destination for the building of the temple. Anyway, so he went up there and he was about to sacrifice him when God said, don't follow through. Don't hurt him, because you have shown that you have faith in me. You have not withheld even your beloved son. And so what did he see at that point? He saw a ram, an unblemished ram. Its horn stuck in a bush. Nothing wrong with it, just stuck. And that's what he took and sacrificed instead of his son. That's an important thing that we're going to come back to later. So from there, Isaac, he ended up getting married to Rebekah, and he loved her very much. And the trouble was that after 20 years, she was not getting pregnant. Well, how's this going to happen? God, you promised a lot of descendants. How this is going to happen if my wife is not getting pregnant? Lord, help her. And God did. So she got pregnant and gave birth to twins, Jacob and Esau, Esau being the older. Esau, his other name is Edom. And Esau, the red hairy one. He was named red actually for two reasons. But this is the first one, because he was red in complexion and hairy. And his Esau means hairy, and Edom means red. And they grew up. Jacob, his name means he grabs onto the heel. I don't know how that works exactly. That sounds like like a sentence in English, but Jacob means heel grabber, which is a euphemism also for being deceitful. So Jacob ended up being exactly as his name described. They grew up, and Esau was set to become the one who got the blessing from his father, but then you know what happened. He deceived his father and stole the blessing from his brother. So he ended up running. His brother got very angry with him, and he ran away from home. And he ended up going in that place, Padan Aram. He got married to his cousin. She was literally his first cousin, Rachel. And then also, as it often happens, people who have a certain character flaw, they end up getting that back. Some other religions would call it karma, right? But it's a very natural thing that happens to us also. So God has something to do with that. He was taught by his own experiences how bad deceitfulness can be. He was deceived by his father-in-law. Anyway, so he ended up with 4 wives because of this whole sibling rivalry, his wives being siblings, sisters. He ended up with 4 wives instead of just 1 or even 2. He ended up with 4 wives and lots of children. And during that time, God blessed him for the 21 years that he was there in Padan Aram. And he had lots of children. Up to that point, 12 children, one being a female, a daughter, whose name was Dinah. But we'll kind of skip over her story for now. Anyway, so there were, see if I can remember the names. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Gad, Asher. How many have I gotten to now? Yeah. Anyway, and then the last 2, but the youngest wasn't born yet at that time. The last 2 were Joseph and Benjamin. At that time, they left. They went back home. And on the way home, God renamed him. God gave Jacob a second name, or a new name, and his name was Israel. Israel, which means Prince of God. So, but if you remember, he had 4 wives, and his favorite wife was Rachel. On the way home, Rachel was giving birth to the youngest, her younger son, who ended up being called Benjamin. And she had trouble in childbirth, and she ended up dying in childbirth. And so she was buried there on the way in a place called Ephrathah, on the way to Ephrathah. So she was buried there, and because she was his favorite wife, Therefore, her sons were his favorites, Jacob's favorites, Joseph and Benjamin. And so then later on, you remember what happened? Favoritism causes problems in families often, even to this day. There ended up being jealousy, and he showed his favoritism by making this beautiful coat for the son Joseph. And this caused jealousy. And so the brothers got more and more angry toward him. They couldn't speak a kind word toward him. Then he had these two dreams. Have you ever watched that children-based film made for children? Joseph, King of Dreams. Yeah, if you've ever watched that, it's kind of good. There are a little bit of mistakes made in it, but it's generally a very good film. It reminds you of some of the things that you're hearing now. Anyway, Joseph, he was the favorite. He had these dreams, and the dreams kind of indicated that in the future his brothers would bow down to him. And the brothers were not really looking forward to that. They didn't like that at all. What do you think? What are you thinking? You, the young brother, we're going to bow down to you? Dream on. Yeah. If my younger brother, when we were little, had come up with a dream like that, I wouldn't have been too happy with him either. What do you think? Pipsqueak, shrimp. So they weren't happy at all. Now, one day, his father sent him out, as he was wont to do, sent him out to check on his brothers. You remember what happened? His brothers saw him a long way off and said, "Here comes the dreamer." And they ended up selling their brother and lying to their father, or basically deceiving their father into thinking that he was killed by a wild animal. But in the meantime, they'd sold him as a slave, and he ended up there. He's thrown into a well, and then later on taken out of there and sold as a slave to Egypt. Now, their brother, they had sold their brother. They had rejected him, sold him. They hated him. They sold their brother as a slave and sold him for 20 pieces of silver. And that would be like a traitorous or a deceitful or very bad thing to do. Very hurtful to him. Imagine the pain that he must have felt all the time that he was in Egypt. He was sold there, but he was very faithful to the Lord. God had not forgotten him. Though his brothers had rejected him, God had not forgotten him. God took care of him. And everything that he did as a slave and then later, he did as best he could. He was faithful to the Lord, even when he was tempted to commit adultery with his master's wife. He trusted the Lord. And he did exactly what he should have done. When she tried to force herself on him, what did he do? They were alone. Nobody saw. Nobody saw. He could have done it, and nobody would have known the better. Right? Except, he thought, God sees. He was thinking right. And he ran out of there. He didn't let himself be tempted. He ran out of there. He ran away from temptation. That was the right thing to do. But he ended up being repaid for his goodness and faithfulness with prison time. He was thrown into prison. Remember? Here's where the dreaming comes back in. And God used an incident with a couple of other prisoners in there to indicate that he could, through him, interpret dreams. Later on, when one of the prisoners was was released from prison and brought back to his job as a wine tester. He had forgotten about Joseph, but then there, while he was in prison, the king had a dream. The king dreamt about seven and then seven. 7 years, or seven, okay, sorry, I'll go back a little bit. He dreamt that there were 7 fat cows grazing along the side of the river, and then 7 skinny cows came up and ate them but remained skinny. And then 7 ears of grain, fat ears of grain, swallowed by 7 skinny ears of grain, but they remained skinny. And God allowed Joseph to interpret them. And the interpretation was that there are going to be 7 years of bountiful harvests, and then after that, 7 years of famine. Nothing to be harvested. And he said, King, if I may give you some advice, I would pick somebody who you trust to gather the grain during the first 7 years, so that during the second 7 years, the people will have something to eat. Excellent idea. Joseph, you're the one. So Joseph, who had been first a slave and then imprisoned, was now lifted up to a high position. First year. During the first year of famine, 7 years happened. Plenty of food. He was busy gathering all the excess of their harvests. Huge amounts that he gathered. Then came the 7 years of famine. The first year, not too much problem. People had a little food to spare, so they used that up. During that first year, it was gone. Second year, no food in Egypt. So they went to Joseph, and Joseph sold them grain. He was put in charge of all the grain. And the king got all of the money in all of Egypt and the countries around, because there was famine in the other countries as well. Then the third year came, and now there's no money, there's no food. They came to him and sold him all their cattle. 3 years, no food, no cattle, no money. Well, in Canaan, where his brothers were, there was also a famine. And they heard about that. And so Jacob, or Israel, he said, what are you sitting about, moping around, all gloomy faces? Haven't you heard? There's some food down in Egypt. Go there and buy some. So they went down there. But not Benjamin. Benjamin was not allowed to go down there. Remember, the father thought that Joseph was dead. Benjamin is his now new favorite son, the son of Rachel. So no, he's not allowed to go down there. He's afraid something might happen to him. So they went on down there, the 10 brothers. And when they got there, guess who they met? Joseph. Now Joseph is looking a little bit different from when he'd left. And remember, this has been a long time already. When he reached Egypt, he was about 17 years old. Now, many years have passed. He's already second richest, second highest position in all of Egypt. Probably gold and everything else beautifully adorned. He's married and has 2 children, Ephraim and Manasseh. And so when they get here, they didn't expect this. They did not recognize him. Well, who would have expected it? Who would have recognized it? Sometimes I'm the same way. I'll come into a store, and I've met somebody else somewhere else, And when I come into the store, I don't recognize them because it's a different place, different situation, right? Especially here. Slaves probably didn't have a very good survival rate back in those days. I don't know if they'd even expected him to still be alive at this point. Now he's a very high position. They came to him to buy grain because he's the one managing the sale of grain. And what they do? The first thing they do when they got there, in order to show respect, they bowed down to Joseph. And Joseph, by this time, he's speaking Egyptian pretty fluently. And they don't like that. He doesn't look like the brother that they had sold. And he recognized them. Well, when he saw them, he remembered. Now they're bowing down. He remembered those dreams. And he remembered all that had happened there. I'm not going to give you all the details of what happened during that time, but he tested them for some time. He tested his brothers to find out how they were, if they had changed, I guess. He tested them. And they had changed. So at the end of this whole time, I'll read in chapter 45 of Genesis. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all of his attendants, and he cried out, "Have everyone leave my presence." So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified in his presence. Already by this time, they had bowed down to him in fear for their very lives. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." When they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt." Well, if they weren't afraid before, they were now. And now, do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will not be plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. This is a story of redemption. The very brother that they had sold as a slave into Egypt, would be their salvation. This is a good picture of a coming event, and you already know what this is leading to. But he was a picture of someone who would come later. So at this point he says, "Go back to our father and bring him and bring your families all here to Egypt so that I can take care of you." And so for the next 5 years, Joseph was taking care of his brothers, giving them the food that they needed and their whole families. By that time when they went to Egypt, remember Abraham, he had no children, and then he had to wait 25 years, and then it was kind of a slow start to this look up at the stars scenario, right? And then he eventually got one son. There are other sons through other things, but I'm not going to go into that. And then that one son had only 2 sons. Jacob then had 12 sons. And now, by the time they got to Egypt, he has 70. There are 70 people. 70 and other names, depending on how you count it. It could be 75. So anyway, it's a beginning. It's a beginning to great increase in numbers for the people of Israel, the offspring of Israel, the prince. So, by this time, when Jacob arrived, he is overjoyed. He is overjoyed. He said, I never thought that I'd see your face again, and here I get to see you while I'm still alive. And God had promised that his own son, would close his eyes when he died. So there he was in Egypt, and Joseph was taking care of them all. Now, something else happened there. When Jacob became old, he gave him a blessing to his sons, and the son, the fourth son, actually the son who came up with the idea of selling their brother, Joseph, he had indicated through this testing time that he was a changed man. And Jacob saw this, and when he gave a blessing, he gave a very big blessing to Judah. Judah was a changed man. He made a big blessing to him, and he said, someday in your offspring, there can become kings that come from you. This is going to be something I'm going to refer to later when we go through the line toward the promise that God had made, the blessing of all people groups through the descendants. So Jacob was getting old. He blessed his sons before he died. And when he died, the brothers came to Joseph. They made up a story because now they're afraid. They thought, okay, Joseph has been nice to us while our father has been living. He didn't want to cause harm or grief to our father, so he was being nice to us for a little while. Now, Dad's dead. What's Joseph going to do now? Let's see. Let's go in chapter 50. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him? So they sent word to Joseph saying, your father left these instructions. He didn't actually, but your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I asked you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now, please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father. When their message came to him, Joseph wept. Joseph was heartbroken. Maybe he was heartbroken because his brothers had been carrying this guilt for so long, and they didn't yet trust him. They still didn't understand his heart. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him, bowing again. We are your slaves, they said. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Beautiful, huh? Isn't it beautiful when forgiveness occurs? He's a good picture of God. God loves to forgive. They humbled themselves before their brother, and they received forgiveness. It's the same thing that happens with us and God. When we humble ourselves, admitting our wrong, he is ready. And at the times when we are doubting his goodness and think that he's holding a grudge toward us, thinking he's waiting and watching for us to do something wrong so he can strike us with lightning or whatever he does, No. He weeps. He weeps because we still haven't understood his love, his forgiveness, his mercy and grace. And sometimes we do things intentionally harmful. Even at that time, God is able to take it and use it for something, for his plan to do something good. So don't fret. We all fail. Adam failed. We all failed. But God is able to use even those failures to bring something good. This is redemption. A reconciliation. God is the God of reconciliation. He wants to bring us back to him. He loves us. Also when we fail. Now, Jacob died there, and then they took his body and buried it in Canaan. They say he rested with his fathers. You know, actually, there's a literal meaning for that. When they in the old days, when they buried people, they would put them like in a cave or a hollowed out place often, especially if they could afford it. And then there was like a bench in there. And they would lay the carcass, the body, on a bench. And after some time, of course, the body is now just bones. So they take those bones and they put it in this container. Like it's often a stone box. They put it in there. And then comes the next person that dies, and their body decomposes until it's just bones. And then they put it in the same box with the bones of the fathers, right? Or the wife or whatever. So this is literal. He rested with his fathers, the bones there in the same container. So he rested with his fathers. And then Joseph, he was getting old. So he made his brothers promise. He said, you're getting close to our time here, but he said, God is certainly going to come to your rescue one day, and at that time, promise me that you are going to take my bones and bury them in the land of Canaan, the land that God promised to our forefathers, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Promise me. So they promised him. He was about 110 years old when he died. And as often happens, people forgot about him after a while. And the new king that came, the old king had died, the new king came, and he forgot. He disregarded. He decided not to remember about all the good things that Joseph had done in saving their whole country and other countries as well. And the new king, he didn't trust the people, the Israelites, the descendants of Israel. Well, so he started to mistreat them. We're running out of time today, so I think I'm going to have to continue this on the next time. But here's what happened in a nutshell, just as an introduction to the next story. He started to mistreat the people. He gave them heavy jobs. He forced them into slavery and doing heavy jobs. And the kind of jobs that they were doing were like in the fields and making bricks for these cities, these store cities. So they were making these heavy jobs, heavy bricks. And he was thinking that if they were forced into doing these really heavy jobs, then they would become weak and they wouldn't continue to reproduce so prolifically. They had increased a lot. And by this time, hundreds of years had passed. We don't know exactly how long. And the people of Israel had increased a lot. And the Egyptians didn't trust them, and the king didn't trust them. He thought, we better do something about this, because otherwise they are going to, if we come into war with some other people, they're going to go take the side of the other side, and then we'll be in trouble. So we have to make them weak. Well, that didn't work very well. They got stronger, actually, and they continue to increase. So this is the beginning of the story of their slavery. Very heavy, hard work, and they used them ruthlessly. We don't know exactly how they did that, probably with whips and everything else, as you see there. But they were in sore trouble. But you remember, all this also is part of the plan. God had said to Abraham, your people will become strangers in another land, become foreigners in another land. For 400 years they will be there, and they will be mistreated and enslaved. And then I will come to their rescue. God had said all of this, he had said beforehand, hundreds of years beforehand. It was no surprise to God. But 400 years is a very long time. And I think probably the people are starting to forget the promises of God, perhaps not trusting anymore. God has forgotten us. But God doesn't forget. So next time we hear the rest of the story.